Why do people celebrate Cinco de Mayo? Why do Americans celebrate Cinco de Mayo? Isn't that a Mexican holiday? Isn't that a Mexican tradition? Sort of. People in Mexico don't even really celebrate Cinco de Mayo very much. And why is that? Because it wasn't very significant to them. It's actually more significant to us in America than it was to them. And I'll explain why if you keep watching the video. But we have to go all the way back to 1861 to understand what's going on. Mexico owed a national debt, like tons of money. It's, like we do now. But they owed money to France, Britain, and Spain. And in 1861, they're like, hey, we're bankrupt. We were declaring bankruptcy. They probably did it like Michael Scott in The Office. They shouted out, we declare bankruptcy. And that didn't sit well with France. I'm sure Britain and Spain weren't happy, but they kind of gave them a little bit of grace. France decided, hey, we're going to go there. We're going to go to Mexico and we're going to take over Mexico. And not that they necessarily cared about taking over Mexico. We were fighting our civil war. We were busy in the middle of our civil war. So France saw that as an opportunity to get a foothold in North America and then interfere, just be here, right? And then have their influence on us, on America. And even more so, their plan was, and this was Napoleon III. He was one of the nephews of the more famous Napoleon from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Napoleon Bonaparte. So his plan was to take over Mexico, provide the Confederate Army with artillery and troops, basically, in exchange for cotton, because cotton was a commodity they couldn't get. There's some sort of blockade that they couldn't get cotton in Europe, so they were going to take over the cotton trade, basically, and so they wanted the South to win the war against the North. And the South was actually, at that time, the South was actually doing pretty well against the North. They were holding their own. So France sailed the army across the shining sea and amassed on the coast of Mexico with the intention of marching across the country to Mexico City and taking over the country and then enacting the rest of their plan. And that's what they did. They started marching their forces to Mexico City. They had about 8,000 professional soldiers. They were very well armed, well trained, and they were just marching across Mexico, taking over each little part of Mexico. And when they got to a place called Puebla on May 5th, 1862, they ran into a little resistance. It was a one-day battle, and it was this little ragtag force of Mexican people caused so much damage, inflicted so much damage on the French, that the French army retreated back to where they came from. Like they ran away. Like they were decimated by a force half their size. And that by itself is just a cool underdog story, right? Cool story, bro. This little army destroyed this big army and sent them packing. Cool. The real significance of that is it took the French army almost a year to regroup and to reenact their plan, to start over and come back and do what they're trying to do. And meanwhile, up in the United States that were no longer united, the Civil War was a year further along. And the North had won some very decisive battles, and it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that the North was going to win the Civil War. And that kind of sucked for the French. The French actually took over Mexico a year later. A year after this battle, the French won. They took Mexico City. So the French got what they wanted. They took over Mexico, but it was too late for them to really affect the Civil War. And so 3 years after they took over Mexico, we got our stuff straight. You know, the United States of America was united again. We got our stuff straight, and we said, hey, France, get out of here. We don't want you here. Go back to France. And they didn't really have a choice. They tried to make a deal with us. We're like, no, it's not conditional. We said, get, and they got. And so, yeah, we still celebrate Cinco de Mayo to this day, and it actually does have a pretty big impact on America. And it doesn't really have a huge impact on Mexico. So it does make sense that we celebrate Cinco de Mayo more than Mexico celebrates Cinco de Mayo, because they already have an Independence Day, and that's significant to them. This battle was more significant to us. So why am I talking about Cinco de Mayo on my real estate channel? Well, first of all, I find it extremely fascinating, and I like to share things that I find fascinating with other people. And secondly, just for perspective, what if the French would have won that battle like they absolutely should have, and went on to Mexico City and taken over Mexico and interfered in the Civil War, South wins the Civil War? What would America look like today? Probably different. We probably wouldn't be sitting here talking about interest rates are too high and inventory is too low. We probably wouldn't be talking about this stuff. Life would be probably a little bit worse. So, if you need a reason to go out and celebrate Cinco de Mayo, there's your reason. And if you need someone to drink a margarita with and you want to talk about real estate, something I actually know a lot about, I'm here for it. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.